So before our afternoon break, do I need to introduce you, Douglas? I don't know. I feel like everyone in the room knows you, but I will introduce you nonetheless. So Douglas Edric Stanley teaches algorithmic design and playable media and many other things in media design since a few years now here at HED. In 1998, Douglas founded the Atelier Hypermédia at École Supérieure d'Art d'Aix-en-Provence. You organize many workshops and many classes on creative coding, AI, and I don't know what else, weird interactive installation stuff, you name it. And you're also a curator, and you have organized or participated in many international exhibitions around the world on the theme of digital media or digital art in general. And today you're gonna show how we've been trying to talk to robots and telling stories with robots in media design, showing our experimentation, trial and errors. And yeah, thank you so much.
Cool. All right, I have to switch my brain because I've been running the Zoom thing, so I have to go into presenter mode. Yeah, so as Alexia said, I'll be talking a lot about our collective methodology. So my name is here on the slide, but really this is a collective practice. And I've tried to put as much, since I'll be showing a lot of work built with and by students. Hopefully you'll see a lot of names, some which you might recognize. Yeah, so I've been working with the Master Media Design since the beginning of the program, about, 12, 13 years ago, whenever it was that it started. But when Alexia arrived, she reoriented around 3 core concepts that we've been exploring recently. The first concept is around interaction design and interaction design with limited resources. So questions of ecology that are obviously immediate. Whenever you're thinking about technology, you should be thinking about technology in relationship to ecology, but also in relationship to energy and all sorts of other aspects that limited resources speaks about. Another subject is something that the two of us collaborate a lot on specifically with our students, is the question of playable narrations or interactive narrations, we sometimes call it. And then the third subject is something that has sort of been there for a while and that is becoming more and more official, is in a general sense what we like to call talking to robots, which can go well beyond AI. Can look very specifically as to how people interact with various forms of technology or even analog systems, but it is more and more about artificial intelligence. And so you'll notice with these 3 subjects, where is the question of game design? Why is it that we're talking about game design here if we're an interaction design program? So this is one of our students' latest games. This was a diploma project. Arthur Grobly, who was not only designing a game for his media design master final project, but it also is around the question of at least resources. This is what you might consider a game, what some people call games for change, or games that talk about systems beyond just simple play. This is a game that asks you to think about resources, and this game was specifically designed around the lake, which is just down the way from us. So Lac Léman, and through the gameplay you progress through a deeper and deeper understanding of the complexities of a lake. So that's a recent game. I could have shown many other games, but it turns out that since the beginning we've been making a lot of other types of games. And these slides, this Zoom could be almost infinite. We recently started collecting, and that we'll be publishing soon online, all of the experiments that we've done around games and gameplay, but there are currently over 150 games that we've built in the department. So again, the question, why games, why play in a media design program that doesn't officially have a game design component? And as I said, we basically are teaching interaction design, thinking critically about new technologies, about emerging technologies. And in a sense, game design, we almost, we could say more or less that we ended up sort of by accident. For us, game design is an interesting way to teach interaction design. Play is an interesting way to think about, talk about humans interacting with humans, humans interacting with machines, humans interacting with systems. The nuances between these different things are all interesting as designers, whatever field of design you're in. And games and gameplay and play is an interesting way to enter into the question of interaction design. But there's one thing that we are definitely quite intentional about is the question of storytelling. And so storytelling by design, there's sort of a play on words there. I'll allow you to sort of explore in your head however you want the ambiguities of this. But yes, we're very much by design thinking about storytelling. But in another sense as well, what it means to think of storytelling as a designer. So one of the entry points that we have is a class that we've been teaching now for about 4 years now, I guess, around interactive narrations that's taken many different forms. And here we have our friend Cassandra Simon, who created around her work when she was in the program, created this wonderful concept of storytelling objects. That is a very rich sort of concept as she developed it, and then we have our own, let's say, interpretation of it. We've done specific exhibitions. For example, this was Play Me a Story, but this was one of the class projects within that category, within media design, of interactive narrations. And we asked students to go to texts. Almost all the texts that we used were old texts. So this is a text that you may have heard of that's 3,400 years old, that talks about, as well, questions of the earth and evolution. So this is a story that you can interact with, but it isn't really principally designed as a mobile app. This is a story that you put into, let's say, your apartment, and you allow it to evolve over 7 days. Now, this is an exhibition context, so this has been accelerated to 1 hour, but this is a world telling a story inside of a game engine that would once a day give you day 1, day 2, day 3, and then would reset. I won't go into this object, but this has been this is another storytelling object. What's interesting, I should mention here, is that the students were using traditional printmaking without adding any new technology to printmaking, and then introducing light, and then placing inside of the light artificial intelligence to sort of weave these things together around the act of telling a story. Last year, we explored another aspect of time. This was time in, time out. So these were, as well, very specifically storytelling objects. There were many different proposals, a lot of them quite brilliant. I'm just selected one where the question of the smoke break, we asked students to think about time to create an object that you would wear on your body. And this is one of the functional prototypes where it's sort of a smoking replacement device where every time you push the button, you smoke you get a story instead of smoking on an actual cigarette, and it's a story about smoking. So stories about time that you can wear on your body. All right. Another aspect of these interactive narrations, this is an older work, but since we had Lea Schoenfelder, this is a collaboration with Lea Schoenfelder, Marion Barret, who's here with her students. And this was a game that these 3 students, along with the 2 people I just mentioned, all designed together for the Chancellerie de Genève, that asked us to design a board game around voting and why young people that would soon be voting, why they should care about voting. And this is a very dark game. This is a very dystopian game where you basically play within one of three class, sex, or religion, and you define the rules of the game as you play in accordance to your own motivations for your class, your sex, and your religion. So this is a very controversial game by design. And we like this idea of polemics as one of the way, instead of thinking of games as serious games that are going to say serious things, we actually like to provoke serious subjects through polemics. Could even talk about feminist consoles, so we even go down to the level of, so Aurélie Belle created her own console, gaming console. But I wanted to speak specifically about this project. So this is a collaboration with UNAIDS, Hivos, Naya, and Genendit. And here our students worked with people in Nairobi, so working in Kenya with people on site. It was complex because it was during the pandemic, so there was a lot of remote work going on around the question of AIDS and the stigma around AIDS and what it means to live with AIDS, and how games could enter into that dialogue of activists on site working with people in various complex contexts, discovering from many of them their sexuality. So these are very much sex-positive games. These are games that do not hide from sexuality. These are games that explore different configurations of sexuality. So some of the games are very playful, but that have some very dark sub-themes and questions. So Amani, my friend, it's a chat between two young women who are discussing a project that they have to create a small company, and one of them contracts AIDS, and the friend basically talks the other friend through the complexities, but also the possibility of living far beyond what most people think with AIDS and what it means to live with AIDS, and again, all the questions of stigma. Another game that I could mention, again, I'm going to try and go as fast as I can here, is a game more about not only discovering sexuality, but also about consent. And I really love this game because it's not immediately obvious how you write around the question of consent. And it turns out that gameplay and choices that you can make, so you can see here, these are screenshots of someone interacting with the game, allow you to place yourself into more or less the headspace of a young woman who, looking outside her window, there's a little puddle that every day is growing. And so this puddle, as she's discovering her sexuality, is getting bigger and bigger until it becomes this lake that engulfs the entire neighborhood. And here you see a story about sort of where she wants to place the cursor in her own comfort level, but also exploring her sexuality with a friend of hers. Okay, so we talked about interactive narrations, we talked about delicate subjects that could be discussed, and then the third track around narrations is more or less around one of the big subjects of the master's program, is what is now more or less we could call AI. We've published a lot of code online. We share a lot of tools. We talk to other creators, game designers, developers, teachers. And so you can find even some tools if you really want to go deeper into all of this. We've explored with the question of AI. This isn't necessarily about storytelling. It's more sort of how you can program a game. Here it's a story of a hunter chasing a rabbit. How you can, instead of programming a behavior of a rabbit, you can have a robot teach a rabbit to move in a space, and then what sort of stories can become possible. So it's about using AI to create possible spaces of interactions between elements. But that, I don't want to go too deep into that. So this was about 2 years ago, let's say 2022. So we asked students within this framework of what it means to tell interactive narratives, we asked students to create more or less what you would call like a chatbot, but to think of it from the perspective of a personality, and then to design experiences around this a virtual student in this case, or a virtual creature that would live with them and would accompany them in their daily lives. And so this is Ludo. This is a bot that the two students trained to play with you and created an interface that you interact with. And this I can sort of shift now into another subject that opened up while we started working with creating with large language models. So this is actual design done with large language models, training machines, using the fancy algorithms of the day. This is a game that you play, your app shows it, but during the opening days, this bot, because it had been trained on all of these toxic data sets that all of the bots have been trained on, sort of out of nowhere, suddenly started suggesting a really fun game would be that, for example, people could take all their clothes off and start playing with each other. And so you have this sort of weird thing that happens when you're trying to design with these bots, that these bots have been trained, have taught on a very complex, toxic data set. Another work, this was a student-run project, Tamara, who was exploring similar questions about what it means to tell stories with robots, and she ran into the same problem. 3
seconds was the precise time the Instagram ad was shown. Talk to Simon for a chance to be featured in his next book, it read. 1/10 of a second was the time it took Matt to click it.
So this is a bot that you interact with, much like the previous example that I showed, and as you're interacting, it's creating a story for you, and then once enough stories have been collected, it sends to your house the collection. Think of it as like a collection of stories of all the people that interacted with the bot. And Tamara fell into as well this problem of the basic toxicity of when you're designing with these robots. Again, not much time, I'm just going to run through that, but I just want to throw that out there, that through actually trying to work with these bots, we've discovered many of the constraints of working with these bots, and especially when you're trying to tell stories. Yeah, maybe you don't want to tell stories about Nazis and various forms of trolling. So this is a recent project, we specifically with Sabrina Calvo, who is a writer who we work with often, we decided to do a deep dive into this question of, okay, how can we work with these bots that have been trained on all of this horrible sort of content out there on the internet. And we decided to lean into it because there's no way that a culture such as culture of humanity that's been creating generative textual systems for over 3,000 years, if we go back to the I Ching, there's no way that humanity is just going to stop creating generative systems. This is an old dream. But this dream, so how do you move from that old dream and looking at, this is a wonderful work, Pharmaco AI, how do you explore that with the tools of today, but with this difficult context? So we created a workshop where we asked students to build their own data set around whatever they wanted to build. And then instead of building it as an online tool that other people would use, they built it as their own personal tool that they would use in their own projects. And we think that this is a really interesting model to explore. We more or less call this tiny data sets, following off work from Rebecca Fiebrink and other people. And we've been also talking and collaborating with a lot of different departments here at the head, research with the Pôle Numérique around how we could build handbooks to help people to access these tools, share these tools, and so that artists can create their own data sets. And so this is a data set that was trained around rap lyrics, for example, from French rap. So we've been researching that, and so this is sort of my final part of the talk is, okay, so some of the things that, maybe 2 or 3 paths that are starting to open up from that. So like I said, we've been working on how to create teaching tools for ourselves, for others, even for outside of the school, for the HES in general. So we have several projects currently, and then that will hopefully start soon, around building teaching tools and concrete teaching tools and frameworks for how to explore these different bots. I personally have also for years been working with these machines, with these bots, creating my own systems. This is an older piece that I created. Sorry, I'm sort of jumping around thematically, but I thought it would at least be interesting since we've been crossing cinema and storytelling and narrative with these questions of interactivity and game design. I thought it would be interesting to mention this older project that we will, with IRAD, with the research program, be turning into now a larger, much more ambitious project. So this is a system that watches someone playing a video game on the left and generates a film on the right, or sort of a slideshow here, a painting. And so what the bot is doing is it's looking for content in the video game and then finding similar content in here. This is a game that was cross-indexed with a whole series of science fiction films that actually, it turns out, were a huge influence for the game itself. And so the research project, again, this is just sort of like early days. We won't start this project until next year, is to take the same idea, but to go into a much deeper, richer database of 100 Westerns, and then to see how you could take a contemporary game that, like some of the work that we saw this morning, looks more and more like a film that is very much informed with cinematic cues, but that also has a lot of the cues of video games, and how you could cross-reference these two data sets and somehow in real time have them talk to each other. So the previous piece that I just showed was actually a real-time system. As you're live interacting with the game, it's live generating a film. So this would be the same thing. So to do that, we're going to have to go into the data set of the game, into the data set of the films, and teach about content, teach about angles, teach about camera movement. Again, too complex to go into here. All right, so I'm really at the end of this talk, so I'm just going to speed through this. Like I said, we've been trying to figure out how we can share this research that we do with these tools that we do. And I was more thinking about Younes's talk this afternoon. I thought I would talk about one last little sort of subject in AI around narrative storytelling and how do you tell stories with these interactive bots. I wanted to tell a little anecdote that I think is interesting and maybe could be a future possibility of designing narratives with these difficult robotic systems. So this is a project where we worked with these students and with Jorgleni, myself, and Alexia. This is a publishing system where it's a loom to generate stories. So this is a storytelling system where you interact with a punch card. The punch card is scanned by the system. You do layout. You interact for the illustrations with your hands. So this is all using AI. And then it prints out physically a book. And this book is a story based on how you interacted at the beginning of your experience, and then this layout work that you did and the illustration work that you did. It turns out that there's something interesting in this project that we did, this is over like 4 years ago, that actually I think is an answer to the question that Gary Marcus has been asking. I'm a huge fan of Gary Marcus, who's basically been suggesting that purely taking the path of open data sets and deep learning is an incomplete way of thinking about working with large language models, for example. The whole game is to discover the right way of building hybrids. And we don't really have the time to go into here, but he's suggesting a hybrid method between what you could call symbolic AI or more structured, designed AI content systems and the large language model deep learning approach, which is a sort of a strange, weird synthesis that the bot itself does around the textual corpus that we give it. It turns out that we did exactly that. And Leslie was speaking about Twine. We actually have already built tools that actually worked quite well for that previous project. where you can create interactive systems and using what are called text parsers, you can actually create a hybrid designed story that also can interact with a large language model. And this is something that we, again, sort of discovered by accident, and that's maybe an interesting perspective. So I'm just throwing that out there. If you want to see the source code for that, you can just go onto our Thinking Machines code repository. And so there, I've just opened up a few, pistes, and let's see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Douglas. Before we go on a break, any questions for Douglas? No? Well, I have one. I know you recently you've been doing formation continue on AI, and if someone wants to get into this space but doesn't really have the technical knowledge or ability to really go into the data set, I know it's maybe a big question I'm asking, but what would you suggest? Where should I start to play with, this idea of writing stories with prompts or even, ChatGPT or
because this isn't very user friendly.
Yes. So I was wondering if maybe you have
this is kind of like a key for maybe like one or two people in the audience will understand this key.
I thought maybe you have like a more user friendly version of that you could share.
Yeah. I mean, even this is hard. Right? Because these are very different user spaces. Twine is a wonderful creative tool for not thinking about the hard technical programming, how do I build an interactive game? It's about writing and storytelling, fundamentally. And then you can add as much complexity as you want because underneath it all, it's all just JavaScript. And so it's all just traditional programming languages. And so you can plug in all the APIs, you can plug in all the tools, you can plug in all the bots to your simple tool. But Twine was designed for users, above all for creators, for writers. It wasn't designed around AI. And then the AI space has been designed and programmed and created by engineers. And it's really an engineering space. And then some designers are thinking about the intermediary in between that, but it's a huge gap, and there's not a lot of bridges. Now, I've known this gap because I was a creative coder in the 90s. Yes, in the 90s. And we didn't have any tools. And so we had to build all those tools, and we worked collectively as artists together to build those tools. And so I think it's more like watch this space and help us build these things and participate in our workshops and give us feedback. So yeah, the creative coding formation continue that I'm doing in November is kind of first steps into, we're going to be working with Copilot. And what's wonderful about Copilot is it can help you learn to code. And so you can open up a blank canvas of text and you can start just writing with natural language. I would like to draw 50 circles onto my canvas. And boom, it'll create the code. And then the question will be, how do we learn how that output works? So that too, there's still a gap between, I just tell it what I want to do and it just does it. There's still a gap. But that gap is very quickly shrinking.
Oui, une question. Merci Douglas. C'est passionnant de voir les travaux Media Design réunis et mis en cohérence. Très impressionnant. Je m'adresse à toi en tant qu'enseignant, parce qu'il y a beaucoup d'écoles aujourd'hui qui s'intéressent à l'IA de façon, on va dire, plus récente qu'à l'aide. Qu'est-ce que tu conseillerais à ces personnes, ces enseignants-enseignantes qui, du coup, galèrent, il faut le dire, en ces technologies, par où commencer? Quels seraient les conseils de base que tu pourrais leur donner?
Well, I think the first thing to say is reach out to us and let's collaborate. Because, so we've already been talking to the art school in Orléans. I've been speaking to many other teachers and mostly in the French-speaking world. Yeah, I think really what we need are collaborators that can download our tools, that can share our tools, that can fork our tools, or that could use our handbooks or our guides and give us feedback. Yeah, I think that would be one aspect. again, I think that AI is still in a difficult place to work with in a creative context. Because really, when I created the Atelier Hypermédia in the 90s, the question was to not use the current tools, but to build our own tools. That was always my ultimate goal. And then how to figure out with artists how you help them to build these tools. And I think there's a huge cultural gap. It's a two worlds problem. It's the CP Snow two cultures problem of science and art. And I feel like I couldn't say start with X or Y tool. I think we need to build kind of from bottom up, the way people did with processing. I think we need to build from the bottom up some fundamental tools.
Great. Thank you so much, Douglas.
All right.
Thank you. Good. So we have a break until 3:20, donc jusqu'à 15h20. And this afternoon we have two talks that are really going to diving into writing with AI procedural system. So stick around and with Younes Rabi and Emily Short.
Yeah,
Thank you.
can
See you in a bit.